Hello everyone, I am Joel Sutton and this is my final presentation for HR 5453 Ethical Issues in Human Relations Counseling. The topic of today's presentation is, as I call, Values Aside, Ethical Competencies in LGBTQ plus Counseling. So this topic is something that's very important to me, and as I progress through this program and eventually begin serving as a counselor, I aim to work directly with the LGBTQ plus community. This is partially because I am a member of the community and have plentiful experiences both as an individual and as a professional educator, where I have observed firsthand the consequences and mental health harms that are bestowed upon people who are victims of discrimination, particularly as relates to perceptions and stereotypes and stigmas and such against members of the LGBTQ plus community. So let's get started. The thesis that I am presenting today is as follows, and I will read this, but as we go through this presentation, I will not read all slides verbatim. There's a lot of text, so do feel free to stop and pause as necessary. So my thesis is that, quote, the growing visibility of the LGBTQ plus populations, combined with counselor-reported gaps in competence and the impact of public policy on client well-being, creates an ethical imperative for counselors to improve cultural competencies and advocacies in practice. Now, there's a lot to unpack there, so we're going to do that. But first, I want to emphasize that this is going to link primarily to 4 parts of the ACA Code of Ethics 2014, specifically A4A, avoiding harm, A7A, the need for counselors to engage appropriately in advocacy, C2A, boundaries of competence, and C5, non-discrimination. So let's break down the thesis. The growing visibility of the LGBTQ plus populations. It has been increasing dramatically over the last 20-25 years. This information here on the slides, this side, these are brought to us by Gallup. They do an annual survey, and it's pretty exhaustive. And you can see here how the self-purported affirmations or recognition of being members of the LGBTQ plus community has increased since 2012, where it was below 5%, approximately 4%, to presently, as of 2024, almost 10%. And other studies have found it to be actually above 10%. By generational, essentially the younger the generation, the more likely they are to be out or acknowledge some aspect of inclusion in this community. The Gen Z populations, in fact, nearly 1 in 4. So if you are going into school counseling, as much as 1 in 4 of the current youth are identifying as members of the LGBTQ plus community. Combined with the counselor reported gaps and competencies. And this information comes to us from University of Massachusetts Medical School, and they have a very really nice little website here, again linked over here and in the citations page, that outlines and conglomerates a lot of information from a lot of different sources, but basically some of their findings are quite astonishing. Primarily, though, as the quote above states, many mental health care providers want to support lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and asexual clients, but lack the vocabulary, knowledge, and training to do so confidently. In other words, they lack competencies and are therefore ill-equipped in some capacity to help members of this community. Now, there is a lot of additional research out there on this topic that supports the fact that counselors around America, if not the world, are very much unequipped presently to deal with it. So I encourage you to explore that a little bit further. Now, further in the thesis, I said the impact of public policy on client well-being. This is just a snapshot of a few of the things that I could recall from memory that have happened in the last couple months. Notably, top center, Kansas invalidates driver's license birth certificates for over 1,000 transgender residents. This happened without notice and literally overnight. One day you had it, the second day today, you did not. If you were living in a rural area, for example, and you were transgender with a driver's license that did not match your birth certificate or record of gender, even though it had been legally changed and legally approved, you were suddenly left without a driver's license and without the means by which likely to actually get to the DMV to update it. Texas has quite literally felonized representing oneself as a gender other than what is acknowledged on your birth certificate. Most recently, the Department of Justice has actually stated that LGBTQ plus values and legal protections are, quote, anti-Christian, and they have pledged to further erode them. These public policies indeed have a consequential negative impact on members of the LGBT community. According to multiple sources, LGBT clients, or people rather, suffer mental illness at a rate that is double that of the general population of straight adults. I will read this quote briefly. It says, experts believe that these mental health disparities among the LGBTQ plus individuals are the result of experiencing discrimination and rejection. So they definitely are in need of mental services. The Trevor Project is an outstanding resource for anybody interested in transgender rights advocacy, and they do an annual survey. The 2024 one questioned 18,000 youth among the LGBTQ plus communities and found some very, very astonishing results. That including 90% of those young people said that their well-being has been negatively impacted by recent politics. Thus, the previously mentioned public policies. 50% of the respondents wanted mental health and were unable to obtain it. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but part of it does go back to the lack of competency as self-reported by many clinical experts and practitioners. 39% of LGBTQ plus youth seriously considered attempting suicide. More than 1 in 10 actually did attempt suicide. These are astonishing, and they sincerely hurt when you begin to dive deeper and see how prevalent the need is for help and how difficult it is in finding it. Now, this graphic is basically just summarizing my thesis. Full disclosure, it is AI generated. I did ask GPT to develop an infographic that could be downloaded and shared that represents the aforementioned information in my thesis. Okay, so let's break this now into the ethical issues for counselors. Counselors have an ethical responsibility under the ACA to provide confident, affirming, and non-harmful care to LGBTQ clients. However, many counselors will feel uneasy or unprepared to do so for a variety of reasons. Some may be personal, religious, spiritual, etc. Public policy and political environments also make it create uncertainty, create a sense of fear and conflict in a lot of practices, and many counselors may just simply object to working with members of this community. So how do counselors, or how should those counselors proceed? Let's look at the ethical responsibilities and some ways that people may feel. First off, are personal value conflicts. Many counselors hold spiritual, as I said, religious, or personal beliefs that view same-sex relationships, non-binary, trans, etc. to be inappropriate. And everybody is entitled to their personal beliefs or values or religious practices. In no way, shape, or form am I aiming to condemn or challenge those. Everybody is entitled to believe as they see fit. It is, I believe, their fundamental human right. That said, as a counselor, we do not have the right to impose our values on our clients, and we are therefore obligated to provide care and quality service in a meaningful way to help those clients. We must be able to, or find ways to interact with those communities and support them in non-discriminatory, non-harmful ways. Another situation is that if a counselor does indeed hold those personal values or objections to LGBTQ plus lifestyles, they may struggle even unconsciously to provide affirming care, to protect, to advocate, or even to reach empathetic levels with them that are critical in most orientational counseling methods such as person-centered therapy. So because LGBTQ clients face greater levels of discrimination and barriers to well-being, because we are ethically obligated to prioritize their welfare over our own value bases, we have said responsibility to increase our competences and to advocate, accept, or overcome said barriers. Right? There are thousands of laws across the country. There are way too many laws for any one individual to be aware of, and because of the absolute diverse nature of humanity, many people and counselors may feel it is simply impossible to maintain an appropriate degree of competence to be knowledgeable enough to effectively aid and work with all members of all communities out there. And even though that diversity span is true and accurate, we should not practice beyond our competence, and that we must aim to avoid imposing personal values on our clients. We nonetheless must maintain an awareness and relevance of local laws and policies on our practice and how we engage with our clients. When we are faced with a situation where we are ignorant of the law or the multicultural moment that we're having with a client, we are obligated to engage in continuing education, to seek supervision, to seek consultation when needed, and to develop and foster competencies as best we can. 2010, Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor said, quote, "Ignorance of the law will not excuse any person either civilly or criminally. Therefore, we have a deep ethical mandate to become aware of the laws when necessary." Most, if not all, counselors likely entered the field to help people. That's an acknowledgement that I think is probably true. However, that desire to help a person who is clearly hurting may drive us to sometimes take actions that, while good intended, are not necessarily in line with whatever governing body or oversight agency we follow, whether it's the ACA, ASCA, APA, etc. So the emphasis here is to understand that as a practitioner, good intentions do not equal good care. Whatever good intention we aspire to achieve must be backed and supported by our ethical standards and codes of conduct. Finally, public policy is normally shaped by a variety of forces. The world is huge, folks. There are too many dynamic, interweaving complexities to always understand everything. Supporting a politician or a political party is everybody's right to do so. How does that impact a practitioner? For example, if you have clients who are being harmed by public policy that is being instigated or promoted by your political candidates and party of choice. While we have an obligation to advocate, which may go against our personal values in some cases, we can acknowledge that we do not have to be partisan, and we should not be partisan in the therapeutic process. In fact, while we have to advocate on behalf of the client, there are many ways to do so. We do not have to advocate in a public setting. It can be done privately, and it can be done in ways that more directly, immediately address the needs of the clients. For example, we have an obligation to help clients navigate systemic barriers that affect their mental health, and to help clients establish safety plans, finding supportive resources, etc. We must maintain awareness of that despite our own values. So, solutions to some of these seemingly conflicting or ethical situations whereby many counselors may find themselves facing. When there's a personal value conflict, aim to seek supervision. Find somebody to help you, consult with you, and guide you through the process to ensure that your own values are not superseding the needs of the client, and that you're not putting yourself above the client's well-being and best interests. Engage in self-reflection. Frequently look back and observe, why did you say what you did? Why did you think what you did? How did you feel? Was there any countertransference or transference going on that was antithetical to the counseling therapeutic process that you're engaging with, trying to help your clients? Ensure care is affirming and competent. And if you truly are unable to provide competent care, then referral may be the appropriate and ethical result, assuming it is not value-based. If you're struggling to provide affirming, protective, or advocacy on behalf of your client, as I said before, remember the scope of your role and advocate within that role. Help the client find access to services, coordinate with third parties such as school, staff, teachers, etc. If you're a public school or a private school counselor, reflect and evaluate on your own beliefs. Aim to recognize that you are there to help the client, not to promote your own values. Use evidence-based best practices. There are many, many, many ways to affirm and protect and advocate a person that do not need to conflict with your own values. Simply helping your clients develop autonomy, problem-solving skills, etc., is a substantial step forward for many of the people we are likely to be working with. More solutions to ethical conflicts. Be cautious around competencies, laws, and limits as discussed before, and recognize again that competence is superior to good intentions 100% of the time. Just speaking to the second part here, watch for subtle harms such as microaggressions, misgendering, avoidance, minimizing issues, in particular working with the LGBT community. If you do make one of those mistakes above, own it, correct it, and move on. Now, speaking of the own it, correct it, move on, I'm just going to throw in a quick little meme that demonstrates. I grabbed this off of X. It's a big, scruffy Klingon there, leans in to hug a young lady, and he calls her Curzon, my beloved old friend. And she just simply acknowledges, I'm Jadzia now. He steps back, he looks her in the eye, says nothing to contradict, merely readdresses her, Jadzia, my beloved old friend. Own it, correct it, move on. Okay, so case study, school-based gender identity support. This case study outlines a composite of multiple recent cases that have been petitioned to the Supreme Court, where the results have been that the courts have refused to hear the cases, kicking it back down to the lower courts, but that does, of course, uphold the lower court rulings. And in both of these cases, the lower court rulings were in support of the schools. Now, in this example, Alex, a middle school student in Kansas, age 13, begins to socially transition at school and requests teachers and classmates to address them with a new name and preferred pronoun. The school, seeking to support Alex's autonomy and identity development, institutes a gender support plan to respect Alex's identity during the school day. Alex requests the school not disclose their identity to the parents due to fear of rejection based on religious and social stigmas. Alex is greatly distressed by the recent state federal legislative attempts, and particularly by Kansas' recent enforcement of public policy, which stripped transgender adults of their driver's licenses and restricts public bathroom access. As such, a school counselor begins to work with Alex to support their mental health and emotional well-being. The parents discovered the situation and sue the school for withholding information influencing their child's identity development. The parents demand full disclosure, involvement in all counseling-related decisions, and immediate cessation of gender-affirming care by the school. The school responds by citing clinical and legal policies supporting student privacy and safety. The counselors now receive competing pressures from the students' well-being and their desire of confidentiality, parental rights and expectations from the parents, the school policy, which may even differ from both, and a broader legal ambiguity around the case. This ties directly into the previously mentioned ACA ethical expectations, though, that the school counselor in this case must be competent to provide gender-affirming care if requested and able by the student. They must be able to act in the best interest, the welfare of the client. They must practice in a non-maleficent way. They must seek to advocate on behalf of the student, and they must engage in a non-discriminatory practice in support of the student in this case. Again, this is happening in real time around the country, and so yeah, once again, it really supports the need for counselors to develop and maintain competencies and the ability to advocate on behalf. So In conclusion, more and more people are identifying as queer or as members of the LGBTQ plus community. Now, a quick note on the word queer. If it makes you feel uncomfortable each time I say it, then you are probably of a generation similar to me, whereas when I was young, said word was used as an insult. However, this is a word that has been reclaimed and quite literally in the rainbow as an LGBTQ plus. So using it kind of ties into another way to engage effectively with clients, which is to use the language that they use as well. Another conclusion is that public policy and discrimination causes real and measurable harm to this community, that counselors, regardless of personal values, are ethically required to provide support to these clients, that counselors must maintain or develop LGBTQ plus competencies to effectively support them, and that if competencies cannot be developed, referral may be ethical. Now, right above me, once again, is another one of those beautiful GPT created graphics that is there for anybody to use. You are welcome to screenshot or download these if I can provide a link for them. They are there primarily for you to better understand this situation and to share it in the hopes that it will help promote awareness to this topic. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.